Hey there and welcome to the Stress Less Living podcast. My name is Stephen Burns and I've been a practicing coach, trainer and hypnotherapist for 25 years. Each week I'll share easily digestible bite-sized ideas that you can immediately put into practice so that you can live a more harmonious and balanced life. Because life is challenging, but whatever we encounter, we always have a choice. We can take the easy routes or the hard routes, the low stress way or the high stress way. Well, the Stress Less Living podcast is about always looking for the easy routes in life, the low stress ways to accomplish your goals, get more of what you want, and ultimately live a happy and more effortless life. So if you're looking for the perfect antidote for the chaos of modern life, my friend, you are absolutely in the right place. You know, we all have behaviours that we do that we don't like. Ones that don't serve us, that don't support us in getting the things that we want, ones that self-sabotage, and sometimes ones that can even be potentially destructive. But the thing is, it's difficult to change these kinds of behaviours, isn't it? You know, a leopard can't change its spots after all. You can't teach an old dog new tricks. Well, I don't believe that, and you shouldn't believe it either. Changing these outmoded and unhelpful behaviours doesn't have to be an arduous and nigh on impossible process that involves a ton of willpower and discipline. It can be a lot easier than you think. And sometimes it can even be fun. And that's what we're going to be talking about in this episode. We're going to take a look at 5 ways to change outmoded behaviours that no longer serve you. So grab a cuppa or whatever you do when you're listening to your podcasts, and let's get started. So in this episode, we're going to take a look at 5 ways to change outmoded or potentially even destructive behaviours that no longer serve you. So to start off, what would be some examples of these kinds of behaviours, just so that we're on the same page here? Well, we're talking about things like nail biting, smoking, overeating, excessive drinking, doom scrolling, constant phone checking, we all do it, procrastinating, so instead of doing the things that you know you need to do, you end up just putting them off, deliberately staying up late even though you know that you need rest, overworking, which can of course lead to burnout, but it can also include slightly more complex behaviours, so things like people pleasing. There's obviously a bit more to people pleasing, but it's still a behaviour at the end of the day. It's something that we do. Or avoidance strategies. Some people avoid difficult emotions or situations. Instead of addressing them in a healthy way, they end up leaving it and it grows arms and legs and becomes even worse. And of course, this is not an extensive list. It could go on and on. So if the behaviours that you would like to change aren't on that list, that's cool. This episode is still going to apply to you. So let's take a look at these 5 ways for changing outmoded or potentially destructive behaviours. Number 1, mindful observation. Become aware of them. So most unhelpful behaviours run on autopilot, right? You know, we've done them so often that they become a pattern and they just happen subconsciously. So maybe you get home after a stressful day at work and you just automatically open up the fridge and reach for that cake or that beer and you don't even realise that you've done it. It's just become this automated habit. Or you wake up in the morning and the first thing you do is start doom scrolling without even consciously realising you've made the decision to do it. So because these behaviours can become so patterned in, they can happen automatically, the first step to changing them is to become aware that actually happening, recognise consciously what's going on. So to give you an example, in a lot of weight loss programs, they ask you to do a food diary. So this is where you write down everything that you've eaten over a week. I've also heard about this strategy in books on how to save money. You know, the first step is to keep a diary of everything you spend, down to the last penny. And this simple strategy can work wonders because all of a sudden you become fully aware of what you're actually doing, not what you think you're doing. We have this tremendous ability as human beings to deceive ourselves, especially when it suits our own agenda. It's a huge blind spot that we all have. So by bringing what we actually do into our awareness, it then forces us to confront the truth, and this is often the first step to making a change. Sometimes for many people, that's all they need to do. We're much more likely to make a change when we're aware of it. In fact, it's very difficult, sometimes impossible, to change something that we're not aware of, certainly by design anyway. So number 1 is become aware of the behaviour. Don't let it just run amok automatically, subconsciously. Observe it, non-judgmentally of course. Engage in mindful awareness. Number 2, change your environment. So it's been shown time and time again that making changes in your environment will change your behaviour. Now, of course, I'm a huge proponent of making change from the inside out, but your environment does still play a significant role. And there's a ton of research that shows that making subtle or significant changes to your environment has a knock-on effect to your behaviours, sometimes even quite dramatically. So to give you some examples, so a simple one at first. Let me ask you a question. Why do you eat popcorn in the cinema? Do you also eat it at home? Most people don't. Some people do, of course, but it's quite rare. But we eat it in the cinema because the environment triggers it. In fact, research has shown that some people will knowingly eat stale popcorn at the cinema just because they're at the cinema. Doesn't make much sense, but there you go. That's the power of your environment. So there's an interesting research study that was carried out by Thaler and Sunstein in 2008 that showed that if you place healthier foods at eye level in a store, people will buy those healthier foods more often because they see them first and they feature more prominently in their experience. As an aside, this is also called nudging, by the way, behavioural nudging, where the environment is altered slightly to nudge behavioural change. But the overall point is, even though I'm an advocate for changing from the inside out, environment is still important. And you want to ask yourself, is my environment encouraging these behaviours that don't serve me? And how can I change my environment that would encourage something more healthy, more positive? So if you want to stop drinking, for an example, maybe it's not the best idea to hang about in pubs with people who love to drink and coax you into drinking with them. If your work environment is promoting unhealthy behaviours, maybe it's toxic, then maybe it's time for you to change. Perhaps it's time to change your work environment. To give you a more concrete example, so when I was younger, I used to drink too much alcohol, and then I joined the Latin dance scene, so I started dancing. And the thing is, when you dance, you still have a drink every now and again. You maybe have one or two beers, maybe a wee rum and coke, but that's about it, barring, special nights out and stuff like that. But you don't want to drink too much because you're dancing at the end of the day, and you might think you're a great dancer when you're drunk, but the reality is often different. So the environment promotes a much healthier relationship with alcohol. And one of the things I noticed after being on the scene for roughly around about 6 months, I started to notice that the amount that I was drinking was dropping significantly, especially when I was out. I was only having, one or two drinks here and there. A lot of the time I'd even just take the car and I'd just stay sober. And it wasn't an issue. It was absolutely fine. And actually now, when I see people who are drunk, then I have a very different response to them than previously. Before it just felt natural, and now it just looks a little bit weird. And for me, this is a big example of how the environment and the people in it can naturally change your behaviour. So that's quite a big, significant example, but there's also some subtle things that you can do. If you doom scroll in the morning when your phone alarm goes off, get an alarm clock instead. That way you won't reach for your phone, you'll just hit the alarm clock instead. You've just made a simple change in your environment. If you have snacks, keep them in a drawer out of sight. Don't put them at eye level in your fridge or in the first, drawer that you normally open. Or just leave them out of your shopping list. Don't stock up on them. That way, if you have to go out and buy them when you get the urge, chances are you might not do it. So that's number 2, change your environment. Number 3, work with the positive intention. So in case you don't know, what do we actually mean by the positive intention? So this is an idea that's taken from NLP, Neuro-Linguistic Programming, and it's the idea that behind every behaviour is some kind of positive intent, even the destructive ones. Now, it might not seem like that on the outside, but behind the scenes, there is a positive driving force behind these destructive and unhelpful behaviours. It's a part of you that's trying to get something good. So if we go through just a few quick examples. So if we take smoking, so of course on the surface that is a negative behaviour, it's potentially destructive, but people don't smoke to get cancer or get gangrene or to create poor health. They do it for emotional reasons. Usually it starts off because they want a sense of belonging. They want to be part of the cool crowd when they were teenagers, smoking behind the bike sheds or in the toilets, something like that. And then usually as they get into adulthood, if it still continues, they smoke because it gives them that sense of calm, that sense of just time out so that they can relax and have time for themselves. Nail biting. nail biting. They're not just doing it to have short nails. It's almost always a pacifying act. People do it in an attempt to calm down and alleviate stress. That's the positive intention. Comfort eating, the clue is in the name. People don't do it to get overweight. They do it to experience a sense of comfort. Procrastination, this is usually done because we attach pain to doing the thing that we're supposed to do, so we engage in other things to return to that feeling of certainty or a feeling of safety and comfort. And the list could go on and on. Every single behaviour, no matter how destructive it appears on the outside, will have a positive driving force in the background. So why is this useful? Well, when you're looking to change an unhelpful behaviour, if you figure out what the positive intention of that behaviour is, you can then incorporate it into a new behaviour, one that's a lot healthier and more positive. And it makes it much more compelling, the new behaviour, and it makes the transition over to it much more seamless. So if we just take a couple of very quick examples, because that was a wee bit wordy, say again the unhelpful behaviour was smoking. What is that behaviour attempting to get that's positive? Well, as we mentioned before, it could be a feeling of calm and relaxation. So you've got the positive intention. So you could then ask yourself, okay, so what new behaviours could I do that would give me that calm and relaxation, but it doesn't involve smoking? Or you could even do a bit of kind of mind-melting questions. You could ask yourself, if I were to become a non-smoker, how would that actually give me more calm and relaxation? Love that question. It flips the whole thing on its head. I think one of the reasons why we can sometimes struggle to change behaviour is because the new behaviour we're attempting to integrate doesn't satisfy what the old behaviours we're attempting to get. So we end up gravitating back to them because we feel like something's missing. So you've got to honour the positive intention, and that creates a much more sustainable form of change and one that's much easier to transition into. Another quick example, we'll go for comfort eating, seeing as we mentioned it earlier on. The positive intention is, of course, to create comfort, to have that feeling of just being safe and secure and comfortable. So again, you could ask yourself, what new behaviours could I do that would give me that comfort that don't involve overeating? Or how would not eating more than I need actually give me more calm and comfort? Really, really powerful question, because again, you're flipping it on its head. And it's powerful because you're actually addressing the deeper reasons behind the unhelpful behaviour. So that's number 3, where you incorporate the positive intention. If you're enjoying this episode and you want to learn more about how to change outmoded, unhelpful behaviours that don't serve you, then I have an entire training on this over at Udemy. So if you follow me over there, in fact, even if you don't, you can head over there, check out that full course. I'll include a link in the description. You should be able to get the course for an incredibly low price of just $14.99, potentially even lower depending on the promotions that Udemy are doing at the time. So if you want to learn more about this, check out that amazing training. It is an absolute no-brainer at that price. So enjoy if you decide to go for it, and let's get back to the episode. Number 4, create a threshold moment. Make a list of key consequences and benefits. So a threshold moment is where you reach a point of no return. It's kind of like the straw that breaks the camel's back. You have a moment where you realise that enough is enough. Something has to change here. The motivational guru Tony Robbins has a really nice turn of phrase when he says that in order for change to happen, it has to become a must for you. And I don't think this is always the case, but he definitely has a point. To make change happen, especially a behavioural or lifestyle one, it has to become a priority in our minds, or most likely you'll just end up going with the status quo. So you want to get to the stage where this change in behaviour becomes a priority so that you're literally foaming at the mouth, ready to take action. Well, maybe not literally, metaphorically speaking. So to create one of these threshold moments, you want to make a list of consequences and benefits, and then really spend some time to feel the both of them. So first of all, if you stayed the same and didn't change this behaviour, how would that negatively impact your life? Make a list of the consequences. Don't let yourself off the hook either. Pain can be a big motivator. Then do the opposite side. When you change this behaviour, how is it going to positively enrich your life? What are the key benefits that make you desperate to make this change that create excitement for it? So once you've made that list of benefits and consequences, you then want to really explore it and imagine them inside your mind until you feel them. And this is crucial. This is key. Fully connect with them in your neurology and feel them, sense them. And what you'll find is when you do this, you'll notice an energy build up, a sense of urgency to make this change. Essentially, what you're doing is you're elevating the importance of it and making it a priority. As Tony Robbins said, that change has now become a must. So that's number 4, create a threshold moment, make a list of key consequences and benefits. And a 5th and final way to change these outmoded behaviours is to use a technique I call the identity drill. So in his book, Atomic Habits, James Clear argues that true change only happens at the level of identity, who you believe you are as a person. That when you make a shift in who you perceive yourself to be in terms of your identity, your behaviours will naturally change as a result. So for example, if you had a goal that you want to achieve, instead of asking, how do I need to achieve that goal? It's still a useful question. Ask yourself, who do I need to become for that goal to happen naturally? Much more powerful question. It's much more long-lasting way to create change as well in your behaviour because you're doing it from the top down. So there's a sociologist called Howard Becker who wrote a book called The Outsiders. So it was very famous in the 1960s in the sociology world. I'm sure these guys have very crazy parties and talk about it. Maybe not. But it was basically a study on deviant behaviour. So in the 60s, deviant behaviour was smoking hash, marijuana. That was one example of it. And what they found was that when a person started smoking hash, it didn't initially become a solid habit for them. But as soon as they were labelled as a deviant, it then started to stick. That identity label pushed them to the outside of society. They started identifying with it, and it reinforced the behaviour of smoking hash and potentially other drugs. You see this a lot, unfortunately, that's happening in the political world. Don't worry, I'm not going to go all political on you. But it's true. People are getting labelled all over the place, left and right, and extreme and all sorts of stuff like that. And there are very extreme people out there, of course. But what it does is it just pushes us further and further apart because people then identify with it and it reinforces all the behaviours within that identity. So this is the power of identity and identity labels. So to give you an example of this from my own life, actually. So a number of years ago, I started running. And at first, I found it really difficult. I was struggling to get motivated and, I was just a bloke going out for a few runs every now and again, and it wasn't particularly consistent. But then something shifted inside my mindset. After a few months of going out for some runs, I started to identify as a runner. I did a few 5Ks, I did a 10K, and I started to describe myself as a runner to other people. And the weird thing was, from that point onwards, going out for runs started to become easy. In fact, I felt like something was missing when I didn't. And the reason why it was much easier was because it had generalised to my identity. So this is really, really powerful. So when you use the identity drill, what you're looking to do is you're looking to reverse engineer this. You want to ask yourself, what kind of person would I be if I naturally had those new behaviours? And then you want to assume that identity. Describe yourself as that kind of person. Imagine that you are, and you'll start to naturally incorporate those behaviours. So a more concrete example, say you wanted to stop overeating and lose weight to get fit and healthy. You could ask yourself, what would a naturally slim and healthy person do? Or as a naturally slim and healthy person, what would be my food choices? And you could even loop that round when you're in the supermarket buying your foods. Or as a naturally slim and healthy person, how would I think about exercise? Would it excite me? Would it be something I'd want to do? Chances are it would be. And these questions are really great for drilling in that sense of identity. And what you'll find is the more that you do it, if you keep looping it, then the new behaviours will naturally start to appear. So that is 5 ways for changing outmoded behaviours that no longer serve you. Let's do a quick review. So number 1, mindful observation. Become aware of them. Often these behaviours, they just happen automatically. We're in autopilot. So when you become aware of them, when you bring them to your conscious awareness, then that's the first step for changing them. And often just becoming aware of them is enough for us to go, oh, I didn't realise I was doing that. And then you can start to do something different. Number 2, change your environment. As I mentioned, I'm a huge proponent of change from the inside out. But your environment is still pretty important. We are influenced from the outside in too. So if your environments aren't supporting your behaviours in a healthy way, maybe it's time to change them. Even if it's just something small, doesn't have to be anything huge or significant. Number 3, work with the positive intention. This is the idea that behind every seemingly destructive behaviour, there is a positive driving force beneath the surface. And if you can incorporate that, if you can honour that in some kind of new and more healthy behaviour, then you're going to get change that's going to last a lot more. It's going to be much more sustainable because you're working with the deeper reasons behind the unhelpful behaviour in the first place. Number 4, create a threshold moment. Make a list of consequences and benefits. So sometimes we have to make that change a priority. In fact, most of the time, if we're making some sort of behavioural or lifestyle change, we have to make it so that it's highlighted inside our mind. As Tony Robbins said, it has to become a must. So to do that, to elevate its importance inside our mind, then make a list of negative consequences, bad things that are going to happen if you keep doing that behaviour, and also positive benefits when you do change, things that get you excited, that get the juices flowing. That will elevate the importance inside your mind, and it will bring you up to that point of no return where you say, enough is enough, I'm going to actually do something about this. And then finally, number 5, make use of the identity drill. Rather than thinking in terms of how can I change this behaviour, think, okay, who do I need to become for this behavioural change to happen? And then step into that, assume that identity, and what you'll notice is, as you do that over time, the behaviours will naturally appear as a result. So that is us for this episode. This is a hugely popular topic. You know, lots of the feedback I got was that people wanted to talk about behavioural change more. So hopefully this has made a difference. Give these strategies a go. And of course, if you enjoyed this episode, I would love it if you could subscribe or follow wherever you listen to your podcasts. And if you're feeling especially generous, if you want to adopt the behaviour of leaving me a review, then that would be fantastic. It'd be hugely appreciated. It really does help. So I hope you enjoyed this and have a great rest of your week, and I'll speak to you in the next episode.